Going to give it just a minute for everyone to join, and then we will start at 1 minute past 12. Okay, it says 1 minute past 12 on my side, so let's get started. Hi everyone, I'm Sugeshni Sabrine, Head of Marketing at Mint Group, and welcome to Webinar Wednesday. And not just any one, it's the final session of our FY25 series. So hopefully you've got something warm in your mug and your inbox isn't yelling at you too loudly, because today's session is a really good one. Quick note, this session is being recorded, so feel free to revisit it, to share it, or replay your favorite moments. Now let's talk about our FY25 as aligned with Microsoft's. It wasn't just a year of growth, it was a year of intention. We focused on what actually matters, real outcomes, solid partnerships, and having a clear sense of purpose instead of just throwing tech at problems and hoping for the best. So to help us unpack it all, we've got Carel de Toit, our CEO, and Chief of Partnerships, Shaun Reuben from Microsoft. Together, they'll take us behind the scenes of the moments that shaped our year, the wins, the lessons, the tough calls, and how all of that sets us up for the road ahead. And if you're thinking about your own digital future, what's next, what's worth investing in, and who's worth walking that journey with, this conversation might just help you bring some clarity. So the Q&A is open. Pop in your questions at any time throughout the webinar. No need to wait until the end, and we'll tackle as many of those as we can live. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Carel and Shaun.
Thank you, Sue. How are you doing, Shaun?
Doing well, Carel. I really appreciate the invite from you and the team.
Awesome. Well, let's get right into it. Talking around highlighting Mint Group's direction and business growth for the year and reflecting on how we attempted or are staying aligned with what's happening with the clients and with the world around us. I think it's important to kind of set the context around where we are. What does the market look like? What are the things that we need to consider? So I think we would all agree the market is a bit tougher than what we used to. I don't think that's a surprise given that both locally and internationally economies are not growing as expected. Different reasons in different economies. And on a local front, we're dealing with some political aspects, as well as legislation and policies around how you adopt technology, where data resides, how do we get the best out of this fast-moving world of technology. From our perspective, it's been really a combination of a couple of years worth of work to get to what we put into fifth gear this year, and that's to double down on the business outcomes that our customers require and have less of a focus on the technology that's going to enable that. And to do that successfully, it requires very close partnership with Microsoft as the platform provider, as well as with our Ubuntu partners and other partners in the market, to make sure that we understand the industries that we play in, understand the challenges they have, and make sure that we take the best of the technology to achieve that outcome. If you're going to put a lens of what does that mean, if you rewind, let's say 5 years, you would have found quite a lot of companies in the Microsoft space and other cloud space, kind of being segmented into system integrators, which is people that kind of sit down with you, figure out, consult, and then kind of build for you. And then you also had managed services partners that once you go live, they would support your solution and as well as look after your environment. And you'd also have licensing partners that would optimize your licensing estate for the solution that you are taking into your organization. I think it would be fair to say that there's a very blurred line between those types of partners these days. having a separate company looking after your licensing landscape that doesn't have a deep appreciation of the technology itself, how it's architected, how to get the best value out of that, and then ultimately how to build to ensure it stays as close as possible to the platform, to ensure a proper return on investment through things like total cost of ownership over the years, and taking you on a journey on what skills you require to run this successfully internally, as well as an augmentation from a managed services partner. These things are really no longer separated. And Mint, if I take that 5-year lens, 5 years ago, we didn't have a dedicated managed services team. It was kind of more of a break, fix, support engagement. We really started our journey in becoming licensing experts. And we've really built out that expertise and knowledge, as well as how for these teams to work together to get the right outcome for our customers. So that on top of the data investment we've made in making sure that we can understand our clients' data landscape so that they are properly governed from a legislation perspective, well stored and compliant to the appropriate sectors. All these things together are going to put you in a position that you can have experts in each field that know how to collaborate to provide our customers with the right technology, not just for now, but also to future-proof that. So that's been a really key thing for us. And maybe, Shaun, this is a good time for you to reflect on what are the changes Microsoft has made, around how you go to market, how you partner with all these things that's happening. And that's not even talking around the hype around AI yet.
Thanks, Carel. Appreciate the context from a Mint perspective as well. I must compliment you that you've jumped straight to business. If I recall correctly, the last event you invited me to, you wanted me to sing first. And I'm so glad that that's not on the agenda and we can jump into the serious business. Yeah, it's been a really interesting year. When I reflect on it, and by the way, it's also been a hallmark year for Microsoft because we celebrated our 50th anniversary as a global organization. With that 50 years, obviously comes an appreciation for how industry, how the global economy has evolved, etc., which I think really stands us in good stead for the next 50 years, because I think one thing Microsoft has really learned is that the only constant is real change. And if this year is anything to go by, the pace of change, I'm sure everybody in our industry, when they reflect on the pace of change, it just seems to be accelerating at an unbelievable level. So at a global level, with the global economy, with the political situations, a lot of change, a lot of adaptation to the different markets that we operate, etc. But let's bring it home. Equally, locally, as Microsoft, while we're a global organization, we are very proudly South African as well. And the South African market has also been very tough for us. And when our customers are going through difficult economic situations, of course, this has an impact on our business, but we also have to adapt our strategy to make sure that we're supporting their growth. And Carel, I think, if I look at the era of digital transformation, which has probably been here for the last decade, one of the lessons we learned that with digital transformation, it's not just focusing on the technology for the technology's sake. We very early learned the lesson that we really need to focus on our customers' business outcomes. And I think that lesson also resonated in the last year. Very, very deep focus, firstly, on where our customers are, how are they evolving, what are some of the pressures they have to be susceptible to, and then how do we use the technology to really complement and support them as opposed to, leading with the technology. So I think there's been some deep lessons that we've learned in that regard. At the same token, I'm always really, really privileged with the position I have at Microsoft, because I get to work with customers from the very small in the SMB segment all the way to the very large customers, and equally I get to work with partners like you who support that entire customer base. So I get a sense of, how the economy is growing, how the economy is adapting, and then how our partners and customers are also adapting according to that, very, very large scale of customer types and industry types. And I think there is still a fair amount of opportunity for us in the market. You would have seen probably about 2 months ago, we made a significant investment in our local data center capacity. We've been in South Africa, and we've had local data centers in South Africa for the last few years, but we've now expanded that investment. Coupled with that investment, and our president was here celebrating the day with us, and coupled with that investment, we also realized that it's not just about bringing the capacity, but how do we bring people along for the journey? And we also announced a further massive investment in terms of skills development in combination with a number of organizations locally. So while there has been this difficult macro situation we've had to deal with, I'm also very enthusiastic about the opportunity in the market, given the investments we're making, given the potential we see that some of these challenges that are in the market, we can solve and even leapfrog some of our more mature economies by utilizing technology. So we're approaching the end of our financial year and the new financial year with a lot more optimism, Carel, given that we do see the opportunity and we see the investment from Microsoft here locally as well.
Yeah, thanks for that, Shaun. And maybe just to comment, the session of President Cyril Ramaphosa and Brad Smith at Microsoft's offices. One of the things that Brad spoke about is this concept of leapfrogging. And in a lot of ways, a lot of African countries, including South Africa, can do that because we kind of skipped a couple of steps in terms of technology investments and infrastructure. So things like going through to AI now, and people having a data landscape that's 10 years old, getting them in a modern cloud like Microsoft Fabric and getting the data sorted out from the beginning, can really leapfrog them to make sure that they get the value out of their data and it's governed correctly and the security is set up correctly, and that we can drive that forward. The other thing that stood out for me from that session, and sometimes the way you word things gets people to think differently about them. And we all talk in our go-to-markets around what AI use case you're gonna take live at a customer. Now, what Brad said on the day, which was similar but very different, is how do we make AI useful? And it sounds like the same question, but it really isn't. It makes you think differently about the value proposition. But let's perhaps move on and talk a little bit about impact. So it's always great to say these are the things we're doing, and this is how we're getting ready, and this is how we differentiate, and this is how we help your customers. But at the end of the day, it comes down to what value did you unlock for your customers? How does that differentiate them? How does that move them forward? Whether it is by helping them increase margin, which everybody's under margin pressure, so that's absolutely a key priority. How do you help them generate more revenue? I want to lift out a couple of key industry transformation engagements that Mint and Microsoft has done locally that can help us kind of get the thought process going. So I first want to talk around manufacturing. Mint has a AI business called Vision AI. We started that 7 years ago in the era where everybody was still figuring out what AI is, before LLMs and ChatGPT and before the hype. And we really built a lot of IP around how to use computer vision in a way that helps people get insights from a video feed that would unlock productivity or safety or whatever the use case could be. And we started that as a project-based organization that had a key focus on using technology. And we didn't quite know how to make that AI useful. But what transpired is, through a lot of consulting with our customers, we built, and it still runs today, a system for the University of Venda. And their problem was twofold. The one was safety on campus. So how do I make sure that the right people are in the right place? And the second one is how to make sure people are actually in class. And the reason why the second use case was so interesting is that the University of Venda, 95% of the students there run on government grants. And for them to get their subsistence allowances and to move forward in terms of their studies, it was quite important to know whether they're attending class or not. So the way that was approached is to take kind of the way that the banks use OTPs or multi-factor authentication to ensure that the person transacting is not just someone that stole the username and password, but also has a out-of-band device like a SMS or a authenticator app that approves the transaction. And what we did there was every time the student would swipe their card, for example, at a turnstile to go into a residence or go into class, we use computer vision to match that person's face to the card. And that had a massive impact on the safety at the campus. The amount of rides that used to be on the campus versus now significantly less. And obviously from a residence perspective, no one can really get in there anymore because if you don't match the face and the card, that didn't happen. Then on the classroom side, we use zooming panning cameras, and it would actually roll call the classroom every 5 minutes to see who's there, to make sure that people actually, when they tag in, it was obviously them because it was the face and the card, that they actually attend class. And we started building up intelligence and things like the attentiveness in class. Someone on their phones, are they asleep? We didn't get quite to do they have a hangover or not, because I think that would be an invasion of privacy, and I definitely wouldn't want that when I was at varsity. But this was kind of the starting point for us around how to make AI useful. Today, that business is entirely a product-based SaaS organization that focuses on manufacturing. And why did we make this transition? We found in our research that if we do not show the customer the value in the AI investment within a 4-week period, we have a 90% drop off in uptake around using this technology. And we had to really go deep into specific industries and then even further into micro verticals within those industries to unlock that value. So today, that business is focused on bakeries and bottling plants, as well as safety in the Australian subsidiary. And what that does is, and this is quite interesting, is the person in the right place on the factory floor? Now, it sounds super simple, but if a person is not standing right next to the production line and there's a mistake on the line, you lose productivity. And we are now in quite a few bakeries, and we're working with Microsoft on both AB InBev and on Coca-Cola with your account management team to drive that productivity for them into the bottling plants as well. So what does that mean for them? In some use cases in South Africa, we have reduced the theft in one bakery from 20,000 loaves of bread a day to about 2,000. It's quite a unique use case this side, but also the productivity is up by 12%. And that is real tangible outcomes for the customer at a relatively small investment. And one of the key insights around computer vision is that only 3% of recorded video is actually looked at by humans. So that gives you quite a big scale of investment in labor that is not hugely effective. And then of that 3%, humans' attention span tends to be around 10%. So you're going to get a 0.3% effectiveness. Whereas if you do this with computer vision, that's obviously a model, it's taught, and it's always on. So that's one use case and kind of our journey, how we got into the AI space. The second one, which is we're really proud of and work we've been doing with the Microsoft team, is in the health space. And over the last year, we wrapped up the project at Baragwanath Hospital about 2 months ago. The undertaking was pretty big. We had to digitize more than 750,000 patient records. Now, if you think about that, why did we choose that to leverage technology and AI as a combination to provide value to the citizens? If you went to Baragwanath 14 months ago, your average waiting time at a queue to get your patient file, not to get care, was 6 hours. Now, for one, let's just assume that only applies to non-emergencies, because I think that's fair. let's look at the socioeconomic impact there. If you arrive at Baragwanath every Saturday morning, once a month, to go get your chronic medicine, you would have to wait 6 hours to get your file, and then you would have to go queue to get your chronic medicine. Now, if you're losing a day a month per person, that is time that you're not with your family. It's time that you're not productive for the economy. And we had to solve this problem. So the way we solve this problem is a combination of Azure Foundry, computer vision, and our own IP to then work with local partners through our Ubuntu Brahman program and employ 100 youths, train them how to use scanners, how to sort files, how to quality check, how to correlate. And what we've managed to do is digitize more than 800,000 patient records, but more importantly, take this unstructured data and make it structured. What does that mean? It means that there's now ability for someone, when they arrive in the queue, to provide their ID number. The person types in the ID number, we find the file immediately, we provide them the file number, as well as all the other files of that person in the history. So again, that is massive impact for both healthcare, for the citizens, and how to move this forward. Now, what is quite encouraging here is we've now signed the second phase of this, and we are rolling this out to additional 24 hospitals in Gauteng, and we're also busy in KZN province to drive that out. And then finally, a little bit into the more commercial space, in the banking side, we have deployed, and this is always an interesting one, intelligent bots. Because how intelligent should a bot be? We've had this debate with quite a few CTOs and CISOs and CEOs of the top banks in the continent. But I think the lesson there was be very specific around your use case. What do you want them to be intelligent about? What is the key questions they have to answer? How they answer it? How's it on brand? And how's it also secure? So we've rolled this out to a very large, one of the largest insurance companies on the continent, as well as the largest bank on the continent. So again, these are things that is either helping drive up revenue, drive up customer satisfaction, or reduce cost. So Shaun, that was quite a mouthful from my side. Maybe what's your perspective in partnering with us around these use cases and how you see that further helping the economy and the people, as well as the clients of our collective customers?
Thanks, Carel. And I love the fact that you started off hitting, the key industries like education, health, food. Of course, FSI is equally so important for, for the country. But the fact that Mint is so focused on making a societal difference, I think, speaks volumes of your impact locally and, the partnership that we have. And I just encourage us all to continue doing that. If we truly going to leapfrog, we have to focus on these very specific areas where we can have impact immediately. So really love that, and resonates, as you know, really, really well with Microsoft and what we're trying to do locally. If I just take a step a little bit back, Carel, and if you allow me to do a quick advert, Microsoft AI stories. So those of you on the call, I don't want you to be distracted, but please take a note of that particular link. You can do a quick search on Bing or your other favorite search just to check out Microsoft AI stories. And I'm always very mindful that, especially when we're looking at a large customer base that we have locally, to always lead with AI, because it feels like, this is the latest and greatest, and we might have customers who are trying to solve more basic challenges. Now, I don't want to give Carel's age away, but AI, Carel, as you know, has been around for a very, very long time. It's really the advent of Gen AI that has really started to really allow us to really accelerate the transformation in many customers. And if you have a look at that blog, Microsoft AI stories, I think 2 months ago when I looked at it, it was probably about 300 stories. When I looked at it last week, it was close to 700 stories. And these are AI stories of customers in every vertical worldwide that is using AI to transform their business in some way. And when you read those stories, you don't have to have, well, obviously you have to have the right security in place, and we can talk about security a little bit later. But you don't have to have the latest tech. It's really about looking for those opportunities that you can evolve your business and take advantage of what the technology brings in the business and addressing the challenges that you have. Now, you might, criticize me and say, here, what about South Africa? What about Africa? And, I'm proud to say that if you look at some of those stories, you recognize a few customers that have chosen to take the leap of faith and actually put their journey out there. And so, there's probably about 10 South African stories, maybe a little bit more if you look at Africa in total. So definitely the transformation is happening locally. And Carel, as you would know, our companies are working on a number of others that hopefully we'll share details about in the near future. So I guess my point is that there's absolutely a transformation that's happening globally and locally, and it's great to see that how we as an industry are also rising to the challenge. And if we just reflect, I mean, it was good of you to also just talk a little bit more about what Brad and the president talked about. Um, one of the industries that you would have never thought about that is also transforming with AI is the South African Revenue Services. And during that event where we had the president and we talked about our investment, this commissioner was there, and we also talked about the transformation that the South African Revenue Services is going through. And listen, I know all of you out there are law-abiding citizens, but here's just some guidance for you. Please make sure all of your tax details are in order, because I can tell you with the capability we're bringing into that organization, certainly there's going to be scrutiny, and hopefully this is to the benefit of the country. Uh, yeah, so I guess the point I'm making is we are seeing this transformation, Carl, in every part of the industry, even in highly regulated industries like the South African Revenue Services. You talked about FSI as well, and of course, industries like education, health. So absolutely, and we're really looking forward for the innovation from our partners, because you guys get to spend so much more time with our customers and being deeply embedded in addressing their challenges, etc. And the level of insight that you bring is really useful for us, because as you said very rightly, Carl, we provide the platform, and it's organizations like yourself that take the platform and are able to shape those solutions and bring value to our customers in every industry. To you, Carl.
In Mint, we have a rule that if you talk on mute, you owe everybody on a call a tequila. So I'm not sure how many of you want to come for that, but I think I owe quite a few people a tequila there. Yeah, Shaun, I mean, you touch on something. We spend a lot of time on the ground, and I think one of the things that we have to be careful of as well is, we've done this massive investment in understanding what we can do in education, what we can do in health, and how we can help manufacturing. It is also important to go deeper in each of these use cases around what their next step is. And part of the work we're doing, as an example, in the healthcare space, is really built out the IP for the future phases of what we're going to do in healthcare. And as an example there, now that we've done this work at Baragwanath and quite a few hospitals in KZN, now we have this data that is structured, it's stored correctly, it's compliant. How do we now mine that data better? And one of the pieces of work that we that is to allow the capability. Oh, sorry, someone is phoning me. Allow the capability for the doctors to get an AI summary of the patient records. Now, what does that mean? So let's say we have someone has been a Baragwanath for X amount of time. I can guarantee you there's more than one file because of duplication errors in the past. And the doctor would now have to go through each one of these files to understand the medical history of this person, the visits, what has happened. So the work we've done there, and we're speaking to the different departments to drive forward, is the doctor would get a time-based view of all the visits with a summary of what happened in each and how does it correlate to what the person is there for the day. So if they're there for a visit, and it's to check chronic and it's a vitals check, it will provide what happened previously, what is the adjustment that's been made, what is the medicine, what is now the medicine that's available, as well as talking to them around, does a pediatrician need to see different information than a neurosurgeon, different to a gastrologist, etc. So I think it's important that we go deeper in each of these use cases to make sure that we provide the value of the core investment to get this digital. I'm going to shift gears and just move on into the next slide. So, Microsoft, and Shaun, you said it, and I alluded to it as well, is a platform business. But what does it mean? And I think that's also evolving. You provide kind of in broad steps. You provide 3 platforms. You provide the Dynamics platform, you provide the Microsoft 365 platform, you provide the Azure platform. But I can say with confidence that you've done a lot of work over the last 5 years, and it's accelerating year on year, around making those things not work as 3 different solutions. One of the things that often come up with our customers, if we kind of take a AI lens, is when do I use Azure Foundry or Azure tooling versus Copilot Studio? Does it really matter? I think that the key thing there is, will we achieve the business outcome? Will we make sure that what we put in place now will scale for what the customer require and how to move forward? And as this technology platform landscape is becoming more complex, it's also becoming simpler. And that's one of the key differentiators of why Mint is a Microsoft Cloud-only focused partner. The ability to kind of integrate everything at a data layer and a security and governance layer is a massive differentiator, especially when you look at things like the ERP and CRM space, because a lot of the competitors out there buy a lot of different companies, and they have all these different point solutions running on top of the platform, but it's not integrated into the data layer, governance layer, and security layer. So I guess the key thing here is we often tell our customers, do not look at Azure versus AWS, or don't look at Dynamics versus Salesforce or SAP, or don't look at Agentforce versus what Power Platform and AI, Azure AI provides. Look at Microsoft's value proposition versus each of the other players, and then have a holistic lens to see where you're going to get the best return on buck, best security, best governance, and then obviously make sure that you have a partner that understands these different pieces. Because if you don't, they're probably going to architect it in one of the areas because they're more comfortable with that. And that kind of talks to my point earlier on the investments Mint have done over the last 5 years to make sure we actually check the boxes across the platforms, and we put that lens of industry on top of that. And I know we've done a lot of work together with yourself, Shaun, and the GPS team to make sure that we stay on top of that, and your things like the specializations you have in each area. So maybe what's your take there, and how do you see this technology advantage that Microsoft provides, and the journey that partners have to take to make sure that they can provide the outcomes for clients?
Well, thanks, Carel. I must share a story from a little bit earlier today, and you and I share the same financial years, so that the rubber is hitting the road right now, and we're trying to close out as strong as we can, given all of the macro situation that we talked about. And I was trying to convince this morning somebody that it's tough out there, and they turned around and said to me, "But you guys are just Microsoft. Surely customers just have to buy from you." And Carel, when you were talking a little bit earlier, you talked about also a very important point, that customers have choice in each one of those solution areas that we lead in, right? Some very notable competitors out there. So certainly we have to ensure that we're at the top of our game in each one of these areas. And because customers have choice, it also puts that added pressure on us on how we're bringing value. And while you and I can spend a lot of time talking about the technology, if you don't mind, Carel, I'll just take it one step up a little bit, right? And where we come back to that point that we made about really understanding what customers are going through and how we bring the value. Because it is partners like yourself and the rest of our ecosystem that really allow us to start at the customer need and challenge and then translate it into the right solution. And what we as Microsoft are also learning to do is to listen a lot more. We've been on this journey for many years now since uh, um, digital transformation was the buzzword. And as you know, in the last few years, it's really been about AI transformation. And so when we approach an opportunity or a customer to really engage more deeply, we really try and look at their business with the lens of these four pillars. The first pillar is normally how can we enrich their employee experience. And as you can imagine, this is really about improving employee productivity, ensuring that you can remove non-creative tasks and automate as much as possible, and of course allowing employees to have a much richer experience. Then the second pillar, as you know, would be about how do we help customers to engage more deeply and more effectively with their customers, right? And that can run from really personalizing your products and solutions in a very different way to understanding your customer base or our end customers' customer base a lot more deeply, using unstructured, structured data and really bringing value to customers. And the third piece is really about automating business processes or reimagining business processes. And as the name suggests, normal workflow in any organization is normally built according to how departments in an organization may be structured. But as we know, the technology now allows us to really rethink how business processes can be approached. And the last piece is how does the technology help you to really re-engineer or reimagine new products and services. And so what we're doing, Carel, is really trying to lead every customer conversation with those four pillars in mind. And while they might not work for every customer conversation, but given the experience we have in the last 50 years with the recent customer stories that I was talking about, this more or less gives us a framework in which we can work with. And then the technology is what supports each of those pillars. And so I guess the point I'm trying to make is the specific functionality and feature set obviously allows us to lead, but if we're not solving those specific challenges and opportunities as a customer, then we believe we're not doing our job. And hence I come back to the point of partners like yourself having to bring that technology and that platform together to be able to solve those various opportunities.
Yeah, thanks for that, Shaun. And I think, talking around collaboration and co-innovation, one of the things that we spend quite a lot of time, and it's also with your corp team and with your product development teams, to make sure that we're very close to what's being done, and also the best practice to make sure that we provide the value to our customers. We're quite proud that we've been in the inner circle, which is the top 1% partners for Dynamics globally for more than 10 years. And, I was recently in LA for that conference. And what was quite interesting there is how, even Microsoft is reshaping around this thing around, it's not about our clouds, but it is what solution are we providing to the customer. It's the first time I've seen Microsoft from an engineering all the way through to the go-to-markets and the commercials being aligned. And I think that's really going to stand everybody in good stead as that moves forward. And another point which is interesting, and we get asked by our customers, and I'm sure you have the same, is how can you not know? Where have you done this? And I find that fascinating, because you would have a conversation with a CTO or CIO and they ask you to be disruptive, and then you put a strategy together, and then they ask you where you've done it. Now, the two don't go together. If you want to disrupt, you've got to lead. And the reality of the situation is we all got to be honest about this. Some of the stuff we are figuring out together. That's the pace of innovation. What is more important is, do you have a structured approach to achieve this? And you can't dabble with your client's time. You've got to make sure that every single session you have with them is going to translate into how we move these things forward. which I think is a good segue into, how do we go about this? It's if I look at this notion that I spoke about earlier, like system integrating partners and then business consulting partners and managed services partners and licensing partners, that just doesn't exist anymore. Sure, you require this capability of understanding each of the areas and having good go-to-markets for each of them. But if it's not geared towards what the business outcome the client wants and working backwards, it comes back down to who do you sell to? You sell to the person that sees the value, right? They don't see, I don't want the best MSP provider. I want the best outcome. And one of the things that we spend a lot of time in is what methodology that we leverage. And I'm not talking here about waterfall versus agile. I'm talking about like what methodology do we leverage to make sure we get the business value conversation with the customers. And we're quite closely aligned with what you're doing with Success by Design and the different areas of driving this out. And we also do project with your consulting services and quite a few of the big four, or if you want to call them the big six, depending on how you look at it these days. And I think that the interesting part is even those big consulting companies no longer have the luxury of just building a strategy and hoping that the client is going to implement it. There's no longer this fragmentation between that. And we built out a very strong team that's focused on business architecture and then analysis, not analysis and then architecture. And why that is important is we cannot provide you the right advice if we just ask you what you want, right? Because you're making a sizable investment into the Microsoft platform. And Microsoft has invested billions and billions and billions of research to understand that this is the right way of doing things and this is a pretty good process. And one of the key things there is that we build fit for purpose to the platform, but it's aligned 100% to the business outcome priorities of the customer. And it sounds like a lot to say, and it sounds easy to do, but I can tell you that we've learned a lot of lessons over the last 5 years to kind of fine-tune our approach. How do we make sure that the platform that the client invests in is, we take through a fit gap analysis to make sure it actually is going to solve their problem, and we don't make it solve the problem. And I think a lot in the future, in the previous days, it was, this is a good enough fit, and it was kind of a gut feel. These days, it's far more, we take our customers through a Moscow analysis around telling us from a feature perspective and a function perspective, like what they must have, should have, could have. How does it map into what the technology has? How does it map into where we've implemented, where we have experience? And I think that's non-negotiable. And the reality is that is not the standard in the market. There's a huge amount of people that still implement in a fragmented fashion. And I'll give you an example. There's one of our customers that we started off by taking over the Dynamics environment. And we kind of worked a strategy out with them. How do we build side by side to get them into best practices whilst we kind of sort out the data landscape and whilst we kind of figure out what's happening in the licensing. Fast forward 20 months, we now end-to-end support that customer from a traditional MSP perspective, from a licensing perspective, from a professional services perspective. And the reason why it worked is we understood their pain in the beginning. We understood why they were not getting value out of their investment in the Microsoft technology, what went wrong, and what is the right path within their budget constraints to kind of get into this position, with very specific milestones set out between business, ourselves, and Microsoft to make sure we actually hit those things and show the value. So sometimes it's not huge innovation that drives things forward, but really doing basics well every single time, right? And there is no shortcuts. There's a lot of our customers that say, well, this has to happen in a month, then we're just not going to be the partner for you, because what will happen is we'll sticky tape something together for that month, and then next month we're having a conversation around why it's not scalable and why it's not secure and why are things not moving in the right direction. And I think that kind of taking a step back to take a step forward is hugely important. And from our side, that's how we are structured now. That's how we start our engagement with our customers in terms of all the way from a marketing point of view. This is the outcome. This is what we focused on. And then we have the different specializations, from a horizontal business architecture analysis perspective, all the way through to making sure that you're licensed correctly, it will scale correctly, it's secure, it's governed correctly, and we move that forward. So I hope I'm not disappointing anybody, but by talking about basics, but unfortunately, these are the basics that will always apply, even with AI, even more with AI, because the hype, if you put something out there, you can easily create, even if you're in the Microsoft stack, a ghost-like solution that is not done in the right way, and that will ultimately just create risk for the organization. So that's the key thing for us, is we focus on the outcome through these different processes, and we just do not allow shortcuts, because they always come back and bite us, and no good deed goes unpunished. And Shaun, I don't know how that resonates with you and what you've seen, but definitely from our perspective, these things are absolutely front and center, and we don't take something on if we don't understand what business outcome we are after.
Thanks, Carel. It's a really interesting point and so much to talk about here. But maybe just a couple of reflections. And perhaps it's because you have some of your customers in this call that you didn't give me a hard time about how often we change our partner programs and our incentives and so on. So thank you for being kind to me in this conversation. But we're absolutely going through a lot of transformation with our partner ecosystem as well. And you're very right, Carel. The lines between how we traditionally segment partners has been blurring. But at the same token, I think you'll also appreciate that for some very specific reasons, we do need to keep some of these classifications pretty clear, with how we go to market, whether the investment is in licensing, whether the investment is in system integration, or it's a combination of those, et cetera, et cetera. And depending on how you're scaling through the market, whether you're an SMB customer, there's a certain partner type that will probably resonate more for you than if you're a large enterprise where, you might be a bit more comfortable with a more mature system integrator, et cetera. So it's also necessary for us, depending on the customer type and the customer profile, of how we ensure that we're supporting our partners. But without a doubt, and as I mentioned earlier, we are going through quite a bit of transformation on the partner piece. I mean, just to share with the audience, in South Africa, we're so fortunate that Microsoft has 6,000 registered cloud partners. However, in having such scale, we now need to make sure that also the bar on specializations and technical capability continues to grow and continues to rise, because we want to make sure that, given our partner system is an extension of Microsoft, that customers can rely on those partners that are really investing. And hence why it's been a painful transition for many of our partners, but we're really trying to work with those partners that are making those investments in having those key specializations. And so when I speak to many of our customers, I also ask them to please provide us feedback directly where you don't see that investment being made, or where you don't see the level of certification. And by the way, the specialization is just not based on skills. It's also based on customer experience. It's also based on how you are growing your business. So there are a couple of different metrics that make up specialization. And it's for that reason, because the customer needs are becoming that much more specialized, that we continue to raise the bar. And of course, deeply appreciative of companies like yourself and others who continue to make that investment. I think the last piece I'll just talk about here, Carel, which is so important for us, and I know that you've also looked at this really deeply, is also the partner to partner relationships, where customers can really look at partners taking the approach of bringing a number of partners together, where one takes a primary role, the other takes a secondary role, to really bring the best of the platform to bear, and to make sure that customers are getting that value, and to be really opening that, hey, here's my sweet spot as a partner. That's perhaps an area that you might have better capability, better industry experience, and how do we work together so we're bringing the right value? And that's something that really gets me excited. We are able to see the dots of bringing parties together, and I know you're embracing it. And I always say to our partner ecosystem, let's see how we can bring the best of both worlds together.
Thanks, Shaun. Appreciate that. I'm going to move on just to a little bit around moving forward and maybe leave some couple of minutes for questions. Everything that we discussed is as applicable into the future as it is and have been. I think the most important thing is, Shaun mentioned, find the right partner for where you are in your journey. I think a lot of it has to do with, are you implementing just a product and this is what you require, or do you require someone that can actually teach you about the product, understand the best practices and how to move that forward? It's critically important in each area that you understand what is the art of the possible, how to go about this. And Shaun, the reality is here, whether you're an SMB customer, corporate customer, or enterprise, there's certain best practices that always apply. And I think that will always be important. For us, this is a year of accelerating tangible solutions that provide value to our customers in a short space of time and consistently providing them this ability to innovate. For the last 5 years, we've had a commercial contract that allows our customer to tap into all the expertise within Mint, whether they currently have implemented that part of the technology with us or not. And that's really helped us drive this kind of, let's call it the experts on tap capability, where they have an in-house team that, for example, looks after SharePoint, but they're trying something they haven't tried before. They can book some of our experts to help them out, or we can architect and review for them. And I think that this is the type of motion that's going to consistently be required moving forward. So this, how do we consistently just drive things in the right direction, whilst also keeping our customers very honest around, we honestly just don't see the business value in what you're doing here. And that might sound quite interesting, but we do have this conversation more often than not, because the reality for us is, if we want to be the trusted advisor our customer, it's important that we keep them honest around the use of technology, doing so responsibly, and doing it in a way that will, when the next update comes out, everything will still work and you'll get the right bang for buck. So for us, it's accelerating everything we've done together and making sure that we take the IP we've built and the industry knowledge and take our clients on an accelerated journey through their transformation. How does it look on your side?
Thanks, Carel. A lot of feedback we get from customers is, how do we approach this AI journey, right? You touched on the fact about references, etc. But as we also jointly agree, there's a high degree of, co-innovation and collaboration that's required. So the approach we're taking, and just given we have just a few minutes, and I think we want to listen to a few questions as well. Very simply, the approach we're taking is look at what pre-packaged capability there is out there right now. And notice, Carel, you must give me a prize. I didn't say Copilot, I think, during this entire time we've been together. But, Copilot is an example of something that's pre-packaged, and that brings AI not to replace a human, but to complement a human. And if you decide Copilot is not your choice, as you know, there are a number of other options of where there's pre-packaged AI capability. So I think the first piece is really about, how do you leverage something that's pre-packaged? And then earlier on, Carel, you talked about, AI Foundry and Fabric and a number of other tools. And those tools allow a high degree of customization, where you're starting to bring developers in, etc. So once you have the packaged AI inserted into your organization to really look at those 4 pillars I talked about, and you want some differentiation, then you can get into the tools and bring partners like yourself to really help you to differentiate. And I think that could be the second step. And the last piece is really this piece around security. There's so much to be said about the threat of security, and many of our customers don't realize that we're also a security vendor. We're probably the largest spender of R&D when it comes to security, and we have security end to end. And as a responsible, technology company, we are also looking at security not just from threat mitigation, etc., but how we deeply embed it in everything we do and help our customers to also lower the risk. So, that's kind of at a very high level, the three-step process we're going to double down in FY26 on, in really allowing our customers to have some kind of high-level recipe on how they map their journey forward.
Yeah, thanks, Shaun. Fully agree with that. It's the days of irresponsible deployments and innovation at the risk of compliance is just no longer in any sector applicable. And that really is we help sometimes 5-6-man businesses just to set up their mail correctly and get those things sorted out. So it really starts as a discipline for each organization. So I want to thank you for your time, Shaun. It was really good to share some notes around the last year and where we're going. And I'm going to hand over to Sue and the team to conclude for us.
Yeah, thanks, Carel. There aren't any questions in the Q&A, but if there are, post the webinar, you are more than welcome to send that on to us. But we're going to take a quick poll now. It should appear on your screens, and then we'll close. Great. So that's a wrap on our final FY25 session. Thanks for being part of the reflection and the lessons. And that includes everyone's AI note takers too. We saw that in the chats. But before you run off to your next meeting, a quick heads up about next month's webinar. We're shifting gears and asking a big question. Is your business truly secure? Because let's be honest, we've all had that email from the Nigerian prince who just needs our bank details. But the threats we're dealing with now, they're a little less obvious and a lot more damaging. So join us as we unpack what cybersecurity really means for your business in 2025. No jargon, just clear strategies to stay ahead of the bad guys and build with confidence. We'll put the link in the chat so that you can secure your seat. But to close off, same time next month. Until then, stay intentional and maybe don't click on any of those suspicious links. Thanks all. Have a good day further.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.